Hello, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of our Lawful Remedies with the Clever Clogs. I'm Richard Vobes, and with me, as ever, is Karen Dodd. Hello, Karen.
Hello, Richard.
How are you?
I'm okay.
We had sorry, just getting some technical stuff. We've had a bit of a major panic here in the studio whilst we were getting everything ready and sorting a few things out. Last minute panic, as it always happens on a live show. We had a fantastic show last time, did we not? A week ago. Mm-hmm. 18,500 people were watching.
Brilliant.
Not live, as of this time, but we had about 1,000 people watching live. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate you coming on and watching. We had a fantastic panel. To tell us about the panel tonight, Karen.
Tonight, Richard, we have David Edelman, who is the People's Lawyer. So he's waiting in the wings there. And we also have Chris Coverdale, who has been very active bringing co-ops together and helping people with various issues to do with tax. And he's come in last minute, so we're very grateful to have Chris there. We were also going to have Mick Stott, who set up Guardians 300, but Mick, unfortunately, is delayed. He's just returning from Ireland. He's worked with Dolores Cahill. So we might be lucky to have Alan of Salisbury, lastminute.com, if Alan can get to an electric supply in time. So he might join us for the second part of the show. But if not, I mean, these two guys we've got are pretty phenomenal.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thank you very much, panel, for coming along and joining us tonight. We're very much looking forward to your knowledge. I should just point out, this is an entertainment-only show. This is not what you might call legal information, but it might be useful information, and that is the way to put it. Somebody did email me and tried something that was on the show and has got himself a little bit in difficulty, and do stress you have to know what you're doing before you do anything. Don't just take little snippets, because a little bit of knowledge can
dangerous.
be dangerous. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Where should we go first of all, Karen?
Well, I reckon from last week, I mean, there were a lot of questions, and they're probably coming in now, and it's quite hard to sort of monitor them, but we'll do our best. But on the back of last week's show, we had a question which actually works well because Chris is here, and it's from a viewer. I have no name, but it says, from a viewer, I wasn't able to see the live show, but I did watch the recording last night, and it was very informative, so thank you for that. However, there were no answers to Chris Coverdale's trust setup, but thinking about it, I believe the 4-page documents you have on your site are the personal lawful trust. So this is going to be to you, Chris. The documents that are all that we require. So it's really about the trust and anything else in that. By the way, yeah, how do people send questions in? So questions, you just go into the chat box here if you're live, and hopefully we'll get to them. So Chris, do you want to talk about kind of what you're doing, your trust, your co-ops, and maybe a recent experience that you've just gone through?
Oh, right. Thank you, Karen. Yes, that I will. Very brief background. I found out in 2002 that it was a criminal offence to wage war, and our government has been committing criminal offences and waging illegal wars for 75 years. In addition to that, I discovered that it is a serious criminal offence to fund a war of aggression, and any taxpayer who pays tax knowing that some of the money will be used by their government to fund war or to support another war, commits a criminal offence. So in the light of that, I started to stop paying tax, and have been really working on that ever since. Now, the underlying principle that I think is relevant to today and trying to find solutions to our problems is all really to do with using the system that the establishment use against us, against them. So I have spent most of my life looking at systems in organizations, and I have devised a system which they use particularly to keep their taxes away from the taxman and us, the people of Britain. Top 100,000 people in this country, maybe 50 to 100,000 people, set up tax trusts or trusts overseas to keep their taxes and their money away from the British government, the taxman in particular. And I thought, well, okay, let's use the same system, which is a trust, to put our taxes in trust for the government on condition that they use them lawfully at all times and never use them for criminal offenses such as war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. So that's really where I've been for the last 6 years or so, developing trust documents, systems that people can use easily for themselves to withhold taxes lawfully. And that's the important bit about it, is that whenever we pay tax, we give our consent to the government to use the money in whatever way they wish. And it's about time we stopped doing that. We must not allow our government to use our money to fund genocide, and particularly right now, the genocide in Palestine. So this is a process that I recommend. We set up a website, probityco.com. On that website are there was probityco.org and probityco.com. On the probityco.org website, there is a 4-page trust document which you can download for free and fill in. And then as soon as you've filled that in and had it witnessed, you have completed a trust in which you have your taxes. And you put you put some of the money into a box, and you are at home, a folder, a strong box, whatever. And once you have signed and had that trust document witnessed, you have a trust that is lawful and ensures that the government cannot get at your money until they prove that none of it will be used for criminal purposes. So that's the basic system and an introduction to it. And I recommend doing that and getting it off as soon as you can. Getting it signed and witnessed as soon as you can, and then sending copies to any government organization, including the local council, the DVLA, or Revenue and Customs,
right?
So that you can stop paying tax.
So, Chris, how you've been doing this for 6 years? We've got a question actually, which Karen is going to ask you in a second. He says, passing the buck.
Because you can't read my writing.
Because I can't read her writing, let's face it. But how is it going? Does it work? Are people not having to pay the tax because of the trust setup? Is that doing what it's supposed to be doing?
Well, it seems to be, yes. I mean, in my case, I haven't paid any council tax for 7 years, and they just cancelled my debt at the end of the year and start again.
Right.
So that works for me, and I know it works for a lot of other people. Last year, a very few people in February last year started this tax trust, and by April, certainly one or two of them received details saying that they don't owe any money to the Revenue and Customs or.
So presumably the Revenue and Customs. I'm just trying to find my camera there. Well, one of them. They're familiar with it. So, Karen, you've got a question.
Yeah,
that's coming.
I have. Yeah, it's come up a couple of times by the same viewer. So the HMRC, they're not responding to the trust that's been set up by this viewer, and they're threatening enforcement officers. So how would one deal with that?
I think we need to write back to them and say, look, I am upholding the law. It is a criminal offence if I hand this money over to you, and you need to prove to me that it isn't. Now, they keep saying that tax law applies and that the laws that we quote, the International Criminal Court Act and the Terrorism Act 2000, do not apply. That is totally incorrect. these laws are the most important laws this country's ever signed up to, against genocide and against acts of terrorism wherever they are. And the important bit associated with both of those is that we are accessories aiding and abetting the crime if we hand the money to the government. We know that they spend 10% of our money on mass murder and genocide in 7 countries in the last 20 years. So don't do it.
So just to answer that guy's question, or lady's question, man or woman, whoever it was, a follow-up letter is required. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and send them another copy of your declaration and deed. And this is, you have said, I'm very happy to pay the money if you can prove to me that none of it will be spent on criminal purposes.
Right, okay.
Because I think that links to another question from Zen here, saying what tactics will HMRC use to get their money from you? If you are in a trust, what can we expect? But are you saying just keep writing? What happens if they do knock on the door?
Well, I mean, basically, you have to send them away. It doesn't always work. But unfortunately, our systems in this country are so corrupt that the bailiffs and the others will say these laws don't apply, and you have to keep trying. And I think the important bit is to try to get a lot of local people on your side, get a group going who really understand these laws and what you are trying to do.
Right. I mean, presumably, before you do any of this, you, like I said before, you've got to really know what you're doing and be familiar with everything, because if you get a letter back and you don't know how to respond to that, you're a bit stuck. Should we ask David, how do you deal with HMRC?
Well, let me tell you a story, as someone called Max Bargraves used to say.
I want to tell you a story.
I want to tell you a story. Right, going back, I'm going to take you back to round about 2009, 2010. I was running a limited company that took me into schools teaching bridge, the card game. That was Mr. Mini Bridge Limited. And then 3 years of that, and it was doing very well, but it was doing so well that in fact I got defunded because it was becoming a threat to the system. It led me then to write a book about it. And my income stream collapsed. Meanwhile, HMRC didn't really care about that. They were used to me filling out tax returns. And I had a bit of a crooked, I won't say a crooked, but I had a very clever and sly bookkeeper. And he would make sure that I never paid more than about £20 a year tax. So we're not talking, we're not talking about Donald Trump here or Rockefeller. I mean, you can't get much smaller than Mr. Minibridge Limited. But anyway, because it really is a matter of principle. So having no income stream and getting these letters, starting out as reminders that I hadn't filled out a tax return, and then becoming penalty notices for failure to send them off a tax return within the statutory period. I'd already started doing some research about this, and I was thinking, where's my obligation to comply with any of this? And I did some research and I couldn't find any. Meanwhile, we're now in about 2015, and I've watched The Nature of the Cage, and I've started to delve deeply into privacy and a little bit of equity, and I've worked out that I'm actually not subject to their rules because I haven't contracted with them. So what I've worked out is that they are offering me a contract in the public, in inverted commas, whereas I'm a private man who's struggling to make ends meet. So I just wrote to them, and when this is early 2015, I just said, excuse me, but why are you writing to me? I've gone private. I'm working I wasn't even working. I was just, blagging. I said, I'm just working. If I work, I'll be working in the private for compensation as a man being compensated by other men and women. And their response was to write back within about 6 weeks, cancel all the penalties. The last one had been £1,000. And I have not heard back since. And that was April of 2015. I haven't had a dicky bird back from HMRC. So what do we learn from this? What I personally learn is that HMRC work in the public, but if you go private, then you're in two different jurisdictions.
When you say, when you say public, do you mean, because we often hear these terms, commerce? Do they work as in corporation to corporation, contract to contract, that sort of thing?
Basically, they're working on presumption, like all the institutions. They're working on the presumption that you are standing under your legal name, your legal fiction, and that they can contract with you. And that the legal fiction owes certain obligations. But even the legal fiction is not obligated to do anything. It's only obligated to be honest. And my honest position was that I didn't fancy filling out any tax returns. And that was the man making that decision and asking them to basically show good cause why the man is obligated without a contract. So in a nutshell, all I found, which was something I knew in theory, but I found in practice, that if you do not fill in and sign a tax return, you are not in contract. And if you are not in contract, there is no obligation. Wow. End of. And the other thing I would add very hastily, before I forget to add it, is that nobody in the history of planet Earth, in any nation, to my knowledge, has ever been prosecuted that did not fill out and sign a tax return. So in other words, if they have no paperwork, in other words, no evidence of contract, they cannot pursue it. There's nothing to pursue. The judge will say, where is the man or woman's signature? Or they'll probably say, where's the person's signature? Or where's the taxpayer's signature? You only become a taxpayer by consent and by contract.
And the revenue form, if you're filling it in as a self-employed person, as I would be, it renews every year. So if you've done last year's but you haven't done this year's, that's the beginning of a new contract. Is that right?
Absolutely. When people ask me, David, I owe 10 grand in tax, allegedly they say, and I say, well, what makes you say that? Well, I've filled out and sent off and completed and signed a tax return. Then I just say, well, you're in contract, and the honourable thing now to do is to pay it. Subject to Chris's technology, which is you've woken up to the fact that they're criminals and you've changed your mind. You don't want to operate with criminals. So leave that argument aside for now, because it is a valid argument. So I'm just... let's make the assumption that overnight they become squeaky clean, which is theoretically possible.
Really. Yeah, that's a joke. You are
theoretically possible. Yeah. So the point is that there's a huge issue here that whichever situation you're in, whether it's council, police, tax, education officials, if there is no evidence of contract, then there is no contract. And if there is no contract, there is no obligation. We are only obliged by contract. And if it were any other way, we would have officially serfdom. We do have serfdom, but that's unofficial. But we would be in corporate slavery.
What about a rolling contract? It's alluding to what you've just said, Richard. So if I had filled in my tax return from last year, and therefore I'm going to get another invitation to fill out another form, is it just not a rolling contract?
No, you've just answered your own question because you said another invitation. Each year they have to invite you, and each year you have to accept the invitation. What you can do, if you don't believe me, Karen, what you can do, and some very resourceful people do this, fill out all the information, fill it all out correctly, but don't sign it. It's a bit like when you give notice of driver identity on a speeding thing. You fill it all out, identify the driver, but you don't sign it. There's nothing they can do with it.
Right. That's very interesting. What about those poor people who are not self-employed or freelance or anything like that, who are on PAYE and feel the same? Are they then more to go to Chris's idea? But you've got to get to the...
When you see these funny-looking glasses, you know I've come prepared. So let me just...
Well, it's part of the comedy show.
It's slightly dubious now what that means.
Yeah. Well, let me just read out. I'm killing a few birds with one stone here. I'm being a bit cheeky. I'm reading out an excerpt from my course notes on my my universal rights course. Right. This is PAYE situation, which will come as a surprise to some people. It is a grey area, but people need to take the following into account. Employment Rights Act 1996. I'm going to say it twice so people get a chance to, I mean, on the playback, they can always listen again. Employment Rights Act 1996, Section 13. So I'll repeat that. Employment Rights Act 1996, Section 13 says in subsection 1, an employer shall not make a deduction from wages of a worker employed by him unless A, the deduction is required or authorized to be made by virtue of a statutory provision or a relevant provision of the worker's contract. So let me just stop myself there. In other words, if you're in PAYE situation, check the contract, because that would be the exception in subsection 1A. Or ask them to show good cause. What statutory provision are they relying on? And chapter and verse. We need to stop allowing so-called figures of authority to operate on presumption, and a presumption that makes that works to our prejudice. Then there's another exception. B, the worker has previously signified in writing his agreement or consent to the making of the deduction. So even if it's not part of the contract, the employer has said, oh, I think I've got to make some deductions, and has asked the worker to indemnify them with some kind of written consent. So it goes on to say there are accepted deductions, i.e. deductions that are allowed. In other words, let me stop myself again. What we're looking at here is a presumption that deductions are not allowable. And that will come as a shock to most people.
So just say it again. Yeah. Presumptions that
deductions by an employer are not allowable unless they have got it written into the contract or written consent agreement from the employee.
Right. Is that one of those HR things that you've got to go to the human resources? I mean, this is out of my area of expertise, being self-employed mostly all my life.
Well, the human resources, no, they'll probably give it to the legal department. They will go into panic mode because very few, everybody, whether it's health, education, tax, whatever, money, even the value of money, we're all operating on presumption. That is what the apocalypse is. We're moving from presumption into reality. That's what the apocalypse is, in a nutshell.
Easy peasy.
So there's a question.
Well,
Karen wants to ask.
It's what you're talking about now. Somebody said in their words, what if they enforce your employer to pay through the attachment of earnings? So it's the same solution, what you just said, is it?
Yeah, the attachment of earnings. Well, again, that's attachment of earnings. They've had to. The employer has had to reveal your personal data to a third party, and so now we have GDPR entering into the equation, and so they need lawful basis because they don't have your explicit consent. So first of all, check contract, check consent or agreement, check explicit GDPR consent. And then if the employer has passed those tests, then start revoking all those things and renegotiate the contract, even if it means going as an independent contractor. And if they don't have those things, then they are put to prove that they have a statutory provision that they are relying on and a lawful basis under GDPR to basically snitch on you and steal from you to inflate the government's coffers, which, as Chris quite rightly points out, this just gives us motivation. What Chris has uncovered is sufficient in and of itself, but even if people are not ready to fully stand behind that flag, then it should motivate them to want to take action in all kinds of other ways that might feel more comfortable, because they know that they're dealing with criminals, and who wants to deal with a criminal in a way that prejudices our own interests? It's just, it's a no-brainer, right?
Can I just ask you a very quick question here that's come in from Zen Johnson, who says, if we don't fill out the taxation form next year, will the interest earned in a bank cause problems if the bank informs no tax paid in interest?
Well, we're back to GDPR. What business is it?
Right.
I've just had a letter from my bank. In fact, I haven't, because it was from the alleged accounts review team. No name, no pack drill, no signature, nothing. And I wrote them a letter, basically, in a nutshell, just to summarize it, saying that I appear to have had some kind of communication, but you're expecting me to presume that there's something that you wrote in it, except I can't presume that because nobody's taken responsibility for it. So it has the look and feel of a ransom note, because they were telling me that if I didn't comply between now and the 28th of March, they may have to close my account. And that brings in the Modern Slavery Act 2015, which I was going to mention in other contexts. Criminal exploitation. Inducing someone to provide a service using threats or force. Now, if the bank say that you must provide certain data, otherwise we may have to close your account, that's a criminal exploitation, Modern Slavery Act 2015, Section 1, criminal exploitation, as defined in Section 3, subsection 5, and a huge figure in the freedom movement, who I can't name, has already used this to see off HMRC.
Wow.
We have remedy. The legal system, as one of the venerable panel pointed out last week, but I think he did it privately on the chat that we have. The legal system does have remedy for virtually everything, but they've hidden that it's not. It takes years of research to uncover it.
Right. Brilliant.
Can I ask one of the questions that somebody's written in is about the bailiffs. So can bailiffs or debt collectors enforce their way into your home? And somebody else said, can we send them down to number 10?
And send them down to number 10, absolutely. Who do you want to answer that?
Shall we see if Chris is still with us?
Yeah, Chris has had a recent experience with bailiffs and stuff. Chris, what would...
Yes, what they can do lawfully and legally is very different from what they actually do. As I discovered to my cost 10 days ago. I've been received, very briefly, I received a notice from my landlord saying the fees were going to go up, and it went up to a point at which I can't afford it. I went on pension 18 years ago, and the pension I receive is not keeping up with the costs of rent and everything else. So it gets to the point where, when it's close to 50% of my income, I say, no, I can't afford that. Right. However, they ignored that completely. They issued a Section 21 to get me out, and I put the money for the landlord in a trust on the basis that I would deal with him directly, and he wasn't handing 15% of his income from me to an estate agent who is a bit of a crook. So basically what happened was that they took me to court, and a fake court issued, without hearing my case at all, issued an order for me to get out, a possession order, and I received the eviction notice, and then a bailiff came round, 2 bailiffs came round on Tuesday week, 10 days ago, whenever it was, to evict me. And they said, then when I said no, and I had a few friends here, luckily, they then sent for the police, and eventually 4 policemen turned up. So that was 2 bailiffs, 4 policemen, and 2 people from the estate agents. And I argued the fact that, look, this is my home. I've paid the money into trust if the landlord wants it. And they paid no attention to that at all. And then eventually the police sergeant gave the order to the bailiff to evict me, and he came in and he punched me hard in the just under my throat.
Oh my goodness!
And knocked me down to the ground, and I had to go to hospital. I still have whiplash because of his attack on me, and this is authorized by the police.
My
And
God.
they did nothing at all about it except to help him up the stairs, to change the locks on my flat, and kick me out,
Is it?
basically, while I was lying on the floor in the hall.
This is just outrageous. Is there video of this at all?
Yes, there is. I believe somebody might have sent you a copy of it, but there is a short video of it, and I will make sure that people see the sort of possible stuff that goes on. I've had problems.
And what are you going to do about it now, Chris? Now you're
Well, I'm going
back.
to lawyers, and I want to, first of all, a complaint against the sergeant who completely ignored everything and encouraged, having said that he was there to prevent injury. 1 minute later, he actually encouraged the guy to barge through. Now, he may not have known that he was going to punch me, but he certainly did, and knocked me to the floor. And they all left me there on the floor for nearly 2 hours. Well, they left before I was still on the floor, before the ambulance came. It was very painful experience. So what happens in reality is not necessarily lawful.
Can I just ask, were they bailiffs, as in court bailiffs, or enforcement officers? Which I understand there is a big difference between the two.
He was a genuine court bailiff.
Right. So.
Oh, they both were.
Yeah. So the difference between those is that the court bailiffs have more power. Is that correct? Than.
Well, I believe so. And again, they have to follow the law, and they don't.
Well, they don't have the power to go and punch somebody in the throat.
No, absolutely.
That is appalling. Now, I mean, it's good that you told us this story. Of course, it may well put people off challenging. That is one of the things, because in a law-abiding world, if somebody believes that somebody's acting unlawfully or illegally, however you wish to define it, if everyone's playing the game, then at least everything can be civil. But if you've got thugs that are prepared to take physical violence and punch a gentleman in his, I think you're above the big 7-0.
I'm 78, actually, yes.
Well, there we go. I mean, that's just
as a pensioner, it's just evil, isn't it? That's the problem. I think our police force have a lot to answer for. Not all of them are bad guys, but I think some people, when they put a uniform on, it gives them this power. It doesn't have to just be a police uniform. It's all sorts of people in a uniform. They hide behind it. But this is so intimidating, and obviously it does put a lot of people off from taking it to the next step. But you are a warrior, and my hat goes off to you. But we also need to hear the outcome of this when you do. I mean, you're going to pursue that particular officer.
Absolutely. I'm in touch with a legal firm I've written to the Chief Constable asking for a formal complaint about his behaviour, basically, and we'll see how that goes. I've also reported it as a crime, but they refused to even report it as a crime.
What?
Sussex police really are corrupt to the, completely. I've had nearly 10, 12 years with Sussex police, refusing every single one of my crime reports. And this is just another. And so they said, for instance, they passed the papers. I reported it. I reported assault, battery, and trespass. And the administrator who responded to it then sent the papers to the sergeant who committed the offences. And I just, I refused to put it down as a crime report. So,
and I think it is important to highlight these individuals, isn't it? Rather than the actual police force, we need to pin down these individuals that are doing this.
And I've got all the names and so on. I will talk through with the solicitors to see how we can present this properly.
Yeah, this is it's just.
And this is quite a contradictory question, maybe. I mean, is he a British police officer? Is he, English speaking? Right, okay. I'm just wondering, because so many people are coming into our country now, I'm just wondering if they're going to be putting uniforms on soon and what they're going to be up to. Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Well, that is quite
Shocker.
a shocking story. But the thing is, if we don't hear these stories and we learn about the corruption of the police, we still will hold the view that the police are on our side. The more we realise actually that they are corrupt and they're prepared to aid and abet, however many of the... I mean, when they came for my van with an enforcement officer, they came within 90 seconds, 3 policemen in 3 squad cars parked aggressively. You know how they can sort of just pull up and park in the road? Park aggressively, as if I had pulled a gun or a knife out on the... And it's just that I said, well, he just said, I'm going to call the police if you don't pay. And I said, well, call the police. And within... So
they were there.
They must have been briefed. You know, they must have been briefed beforehand that I'm going to this bloke's house and I might need some backup.
Yep.
And you just think this is outrageous. How we got any more questions? I mean, we've got
we've got quite a few. I mean, I think 2 of them can be joined together. So it's talking about CGT, capital gains tax, and stamp duty and VAT, value added tax. Where do all these things go? So somebody at the very beginning, they say, what about CGT with this? These laws. I think David was talking about. And the trusts, can people put the capital gains in a trust? Is there a way out of that? And, all these other taxes, the stamp duty, and where does the VAT go?
Can I very quickly, Karen, just add that basically the form that we've got on the website covers all 230 sources of income into the government. That includes capital gains tax. It includes parking fees, parking fines, stamp duty, all the taxes in this country. Any money that goes to the government whatsoever, or property, money or property, is a criminal offence under both the Terrorism Act 2000 and the International Criminal Court Act 2001.
Could you just give us your website address, because people might be joining all the time, and we'll put them in at the end.
There are 2 websites. One is probityco.org. That's
probityco.org.
And probityco.com. And the .com is for businesses, and the .org is for individuals.
Fantastic. Okay. David, did you want to add to that?
Oh, very much so. I wanted to address Karen's original question is about what happens when so-called enforcement agents visit, and what rights do they have? Well, the short answer is almost none. None.
Right, none.
None.
Because they're third-party interlopers? Because they've got no authority?
Because it's your home. It's we operate the castle principle. If you open the door, that's an invitation for them to come in. So why would you open the door? If you need to speak to them, and why would you? You speak to them through an open window.
Yes.
Now, before I give a bit more detail, I feel another story coming on.
Uh-oh.
Get your hats and your sleeping coats on.
Get the cocoa on.
Again, this is a real-life anecdote, because that's all I can use is my own experience.
Absolutely.
So I've done the 2015 HMRC escapade, and then 2 years later, maybe 2. So we're in 2017, and I'm challenging now utilities. And they're threatening to get a warrant to fit a prepayment meter. So what I'm doing is I'm feeling the fear and the dread and the anxiety, but going through the motions, because I know I've already started teaching this technology, so I need to go through it myself so that I can teach people what happens next and how to deal with it. Anyway, long story short, because I know we've only got 2 hours.
Thanks. Appreciate
long story short,
that.
On the 3rd or 4th visit, 3 gas agents, 1 locksmith, and 2 police officers at least are at the door. But by then I've rehearsed my script. I know the deal. So first of all, you keep the door shut and you start with the police. Excusez-moi, Monsieur or Madame Constable or Officer, whichever, delete where applicable. Are you here to keep the peace? Oh yes, of course we are. Well, What breach of the peace do you have evidence of, or do you anticipate? I'm a peaceful man in his own home. Silence. If they don't go upon that question, then here's the next one.
Right.
Are you familiar with Section 26 of the Criminal Justice and Courts Act 2015? It's interesting how the most protective legislation came out in 2015. I'll repeat that. Section 26, Criminal Justice and Courts Act 2015, abuse of position by constable. Summarizing it and précising it, a constable cannot threaten to arrest a peaceful man or woman with no good cause, or fail to arrest a combatant agent, because if they do, and if there is evidence of that, so you'd need some camera work and video work, or at least one other reliable witness, they can go down for up to 14 years.
Ooh.
Blimey. What would you call a competent agent?
Is this a joke?
Oh,
No, because you said to not arrest or a competent agent, and I just wondered what you meant by that.
Oh, no, maybe I misspoke. I didn't mean to say competent agent. I meant, no, it's the agent has turned up, usually with a fake warrant, because there's no such thing. The exceptions to what I've just said, legitimate entry, but even then only with reasonable force, and a force will never be reasonable if there's a human being behind the door, because that's a health and safety issue.
Yeah,
so
we see these videos with them with these great big compactor things that smash the door, and there's people inside the house saying, vulnerable person, and they're on video.
Well, I hear you, Richard, but I think most of those are filmed by actors. I don't believe that the human, what they call it, the human barricade can't fail, but you have to hold your nerve. You have to hold your nerve. Worst case scenario, if you are a targeted individual and they've got a poster of you on the in one of the offices of the police station and they throw darts at it, then they'll throw away the rule book, and yes, they may well batter their way in. But I'm only talking about the average Joe or Jill. They're not, I mean, at that time, 8-9 years ago, I was completely unknown. They had no reason to target me. So when I was peaceful and rational and gave them their rules, and they listened, because they have to listen, they backed off. So the police went within microseconds. They just said to each other, and I heard them say, oh, this is a civil matter, we don't need to stay. And as soon as the police go, the agents lose heart, because they need the police there to intimidate you. It's all smoke and mirrors. 99% of the time, it's smoke and mirrors, and they rely on your fear and ignorance to gain access. Now, there are exceptions. Like I said, one of them is if you're a targeted individual, they will routinely break the law and hope that their Masonic friends can save them round the back. But there are some legitimate exceptions. If a legitimate bailiff with a high court writ attempts entry, that will be lawful in most situations. So that's lawful repossession. Similarly, a landlord repossessing with a county court writ. And the third exception is a gas agent with a legitimate warrant for a health and safety gas leak repair jobby. So just to sum up, it's basically repossession cases, legitimate repossession cases, and if they're not legitimate, you can question the paperwork, but that's another day's work, and legitimate gas leak, not alleged gas leak, actual gas leak.
One that you can
apart from those three exceptions,
you can prove it's a gas leak by striking a match, can't you, presumably?
Yeah, that's one answer. That's a solution. What about
I'm just here to say that, yes, there are targeted individuals that do get their doors battered down, but they are massively the exception. They are not the rule. Police will not routinely batter a door down because their credibility will be shot to pieces. It already is if you're in the know, but the mainstream
So you know the video that was floating around, we did talk about this last week. There was a lady, apparently she had 4-stage cancer, and they, the officers came and the debt collectors came, I don't know what the end story was. I don't know. She was one of, a crisis actor. I don't know. But you know about that story? Because that was going out to a lot of channels, and it's very disturbing, obviously for her, but if it's genuine, because this does happen, and that's what people are frightened of. I think, we're told all this, but
the thing is that it's a numbers game. The fewer of us that do this without the fear, the more chances we have ultimately of seeing off the enemy. This is a war. You cannot fight a war without some degree of fear or anxiety. Well, ladies and gentlemen, please grow up.
But I think
that's what I had to do.
Growing up is easy to say, isn't it? But we are.
Yeah, no. But I'm only saying that because I felt the fear and anxiety, and I knew that I had to see it through anyway.
Yeah, no, yeah. I hear you, and I think it's great if we can all grow up. But I think we need to protect ourselves, and we were talking about it last week about being on the battlefield, because rightly so, we are at war. But you have to prepare. You have to get your tools, and I think putting your stuff into trusts is really key, because then you don't own them, And then I believe I don't know enough about it, but I want to learn more about it, because I think that is the answer, as Chris has been saying. Put everything that you own in trusts.
Well, allow me to say that it is an answer rather than the answer. Yeah. As the three guys that were on the panel last week were at pains to say, the remedy is internal. It's inside here. Yeah. My remedy arrived when I had the gumption to stand up to the police and the agents from behind a closed, locked door. That was my remedy. Yes, it helped that I knew their rules. They operate by a rule book, and I knew their rules. So the two things that people have to do are be bold and learn some of the rules that are at play here. If you're not bold, and if you're not prepared to learn the rules that are at play, what are you doing? Are you hiding behind somebody else's remedy? Are you hiding behind the easy, quick fix? Do you go to the doctor with symptoms and ask the doctor to fix you? I'm deliberately being controversial here because we, as a human species, we are being called to grow up. Because if we don't, we will get what is coming to us. The education system infantilized us, and we have to push back against that infantilization process.
No, I do absolutely agree, because we've given so much responsibility away. People are so used to now saying, can you fix it? Or where do I get a template from? And I just fill in this form, and they don't understand the process. And I've been on the channel here. Tea has just arrived. The lovely Julia.
Oh, the lovely Julia. Hello, lovely Julia.
Thank you. Do come and wave at the...
Yes, come say hi.
Sorry about that. Tea for David and Chris.
Mine's a green tea, Julia.
Green tea for David, he says.
Can I just say that out there are some very noble, brave warriors who are prepared to give as good as they get. Yes. But things get complicated when you find out that, A, they haven't done anything, and you inquire and find out that, in fact, their spouse or their parents or their children or their lodger or somebody who's breathing down their necks hasn't got the same gumption or isn't on the same page, and it gets very fraught and complicated. So what I just said, which may sound harsh to some ears, I don't mean it across the board. I'm addressing those people who are not restricted by anyone breathing down their necks. I wasn't. I was on my own, so I could be as brave as my own system allowed me to be, and that's easier. That is easier.
It is. It is a problem if you're trying to do something like push against the council tax, and your wife or your husband is saying, "No, don't rock the boat. I can't sleep at night." And I know somebody who's been trying to do that, but his other half was not happy, and in the end, they've sort of had to collapse. And until both parties are in agreement, if you're in that situation, but as you say, if you're on your own. But you've got mates to turn up at the last minute if things go a bit pear-shaped, or people to ask. Presumably, you want to get in that situation. You want to be away from that situation where it's gone to court, there's summonses, there's enforcement officers and all of that. by getting your paperwork sorted out. This is what I hear all the time, that the paperwork, you know, do it honourably as much as you can with, like Chris's system, that you're putting the onus on the government to prove that they are being honourable and not using your money for terrorism, of the murder of men, women and children innocently wherever they happen to be.
Well, what I teach, Richard, amongst other things, is how to be empowered using the power of the pen.
Brilliant.
Not mightier than the sword.
Yeah.
The problem that I come across is the lack of self-confidence. People don't think they can read. They don't think they can read my notes. They don't think they can interpret them correctly and then apply them. So they kind of give up. But if they persevere, which many do persevere, many don't, but many do, then they find that there is remedy as long as you comprehend who you are, what the game is, and how to play to win, because it can be done. And you can prevent the visit. I'll give you a quick example. There's lots of examples I could give you, but a quick example would be a notice to the CEO of any dodgy corporation, written to that man doing business as the status, the CEO, and giving them notice of liability, notice of harm, notice of trespass, notice of liability, especially if they're sending out agents to bully you. So just go straight to the head of the beast. But again, you have to know how to write these letters or notices. They're actually notices.
I think last week we were talking about making people, rather than going for the corporations themselves, but making the people within the corporations the ones that are personally liable. Once you've told them that you know they're doing something wrong, you've put them on notice, as David has just said.
Because it's all education, isn't it?
Can I just say that's why they went corporate, because they wanted to put themselves out of range, to hide behind the corporate veil, the veil that separates the living and the dead. That's all they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So what you have to do is peek behind that veil, find the name of the man or woman, and write to them as a man or woman in blue ink, signed in blue, on the right, not the left, on the creditor's side. These are the tricks of the trade that I teach on my course. And there are this is just one trick, if that's even the right word. There are many, 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 many others. Relying in particular on the power of the question.
And just as we said to Chris, give us your web address or wherever your course is so people can check it out.
Yeah, they're asking, aren't they?
Yeah,
a lot of people are asking. We can put it on the description at the end. We can do that.
All the W's dot the People's Lawyer, so People's plural, the People's Lawyer UK, because there is an American, the People's Lawyer, the People's Lawyer UK.com.
Brilliant.
And also, David, you do travel, don't you? And as Chris, I think you do run workshops. If you know, somebody can gather enough people together, you'll come along and do workshops and talk to people in the flesh. Is that correct? You still doing that?
Absolutely. I cannot not do that, because if you're genuine, I have a simple yardstick. Whoever is in the freedom movement touting truth, if I haven't met them, then they're not touting truth for me.
Right, fair enough.
I've met Chris, he's touting truth. I've met you guys, you're touting truth. But obviously I can't mention names, but there are certain famous freedom warriors who I would recognize them obviously, but I haven't, I've either not met them at all or I've met them in strange circumstances and I haven't been able to get close to them. To me, that sets off alarm bells. What was the other thing I was going to say? It's gone from my head. Anyway.
Can I just ask one thing here, or somebody? Well, actually, it's my question. You said about 2015. You said some new laws had come in. You said interestingly in 2015, as though that has some bearing. You look confused now, as though you can't remember it. No.
Well, no, it was the Modern Slavery Act 2015, criminal exploitation, which is the closest that we come to criminal coercion, in my opinion.
Okay.
And the Criminal Justice and Courts Act 2015 that made constables who misbehave liable to imprisonment of up to 14 years.
That sounds like good news.
It is.
And the other thing that I wanted to add, I remembered what I wanted to say before I forgot it, was tomorrow, in terms of taking myself out to the people, I'm in Shoreham by the Sea near Brighton, in a live gig at the Royal George at starting 2:00. And the following Sunday, Richard knows about this one. He's in it himself. Me, Richard, John O'Looney and Carly Spell are in a gig in near Burnley, Sunday the 24th of March.
Should be good fun.
Busy.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I do have to say. I do like doing these live things because people can come up to you and they ask you questions. It's only sometimes when you're rushed, and we did one at the Leicester Square Theatre, which was great fun to be able to say, the West End. I've tried the West End boards, don't you know? But they rushed us out, and I felt awful because people wanted to ask questions, and you're going, I'm really sorry, we've got to go. And it sounded like, you were some superstar going, I'm so sorry, I can't answer your question, please leave me alone. And that's the last thing, because I do want people to,
interact with you.
Yeah, know that that we're genuine people trying to do our best as much as we can.
There's another question for Dave. It keeps coming up. Oh, sorry, is that Chris?
Yeah. So
Chris?
I just wondered if I could go back on one of the questions. It was about people paying PAYE and national insurance and having it deducted from their salaries and wages. We are, unfortunately, in this country, about 80 to 85% of taxes come through corporations and businesses. And so if we are really going to have an effect, we're going to have to start to really ensure that the businesses understand the criminal offences that their directors are committing every time they take money away from an individual's salary and wages and hand it to the Revenue and Customs. That is a serious criminal offence of conduct ancillary to genocide under the International Criminal Court Act, Section 52. And they can be put in prison for up to 30 years for that offence. The other one is the Terrorism Act 2000. It is a criminal offence under Sections 15 and 17 of the Terrorism Act 2000 to hand money to somebody else, or to ask for money, or to collect the money, and then hand it to the government. It's a criminal offence of funding terrorism.
Right.
So both of those are important things you can do. So what you need to do if you are PAYE and national insurance is to write to your bosses, your employer, and tell them about this. They need to know about these laws. They don't know it. They need to know that they are personally liable for criminal activities, and they're not covered by civil law and the methods that have been used for the medical genocides and other things that are going on right now. So they can be prosecuted and sent to prison as company directors. I know one large company, for instance, that pays £760 million in taxes in a year. Wow. And that's a lot of money, and the directors need to be aware that 76 million of that is going towards mass murder and genocide.
So there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot then that people can do is by notifying their employers that this is going on, and
absolutely, and you can download a form for the employer to set up a trust on behalf of all the employees and keep the money away from the government until the last day of the financial year, and on the first day of the next financial year, they can pay the money, the PAYE and national insurance, back to the individual employees that they took it from.
Oh, right. Presumably they can earn interest on that during that year.
Indeed.
So it's about educating people, isn't it, more than anything? Because a lot of the people in the system don't actually know this.
Yes.
They're just being sort of led astray like we are. They're just following rules.
And we're never taught about tax
Absolutely not.
And finances and corporations.
Why is that?
I think that's to take advantage of us. I've got a question here for Dave. It says, what happens when you make thousands, when you cash out your Bitcoin and the exchange informs the HMRC. Do you deal with the HMRC wanting the tax, and do you say it's a private transaction?
If it is a private transaction, that's what you say.
There we go. Thank you very much. Nice and easy answer. That's what we like.
Or even better, ask them to prove that it's not a private transaction and that that they were a party to the contract.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. That's good. Very good.
The answers all seem to be the same, really, don't they? I mean, you just need to tell them. You need to fill out forms and tell them whether it is the VAT or the stamp duty, because...
I was just going to, sorry to interrupt, when you say fill out forms, there's an alarm bell in my mind thinking that somewhere I've been told if you fill out their form, you are effectively given jurisdiction.
No, I didn't mean their forms. I mean going on to these guys, go on to the Clever Clogs website, and follow their notices, aren't they, more than anything? So it's education, and I think it's not one size fits all by any means, but the ethos behind it is educating, telling people, I'm not complying, I'm saying no, because I'm not in that system. I'm not in the commercial system. I'm not in the corporate world. So it seems quite simple, but it does mean a lot of work.
No, it's a very delicate tightrope to walk. And I would never I don't give advice anyway. None of us do. But people really have to know who they are and who and what they're dealing with before they commit to any course of conduct or behavior pattern. And that requires some study and some due diligence and some perseverance. Mishaps will happen along the way, but be prepared. It's not a GCSE. There's no pass or fail. And the overriding philosophy that I teach is, would you rather be right or happy? So if you'd rather be happy and you're of the nervous disposition or surrounded by the congenitally conformist, don't do anything. If you'd rather be happy. But if you'd rather be right and you've got the bravery, then crack on. But all along you have to keep quizzing yourself. Am I okay? Does this feel right? And know the tricks that they pull, and they have an infinite number of tricks. It's incredible how many tricks they've got.
So we are an hour in. Sorry, Chris. I just let it be. Go on.
A quick point. It is helped if you get a lot of other people joining. Now, yesterday, I think it was, a new organization set up for the Palestine Liberation Movement called No Tax for Genocide is asking 100,000 people to sign up to say they will not pay tax for criminal offences in this country. Now, if we get 100,000 people there all together refusing tax, that's when we can have a big effect.
Yeah, no, I think...
It gives people confidence.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And of course, it does send a message straight to the government that the people are not putting up with this nonsense.
That's right.
Because they come on the telly, not that I have a telly, but people send me the clips.
The links, yeah.
And Sunak will suddenly proudly say, I'm sending this many millions to some war zone. And he's not asked the people if that's what they want. And then HMRC and the enforcement team are saying, we're going to extract that money from you so that we can send it to this war zone.
Yes.
And we didn't even choose him to be our leader in the first place.
And he's got no mandate to begin with. And we just put up with this and go, what's on the Coronation Street?
7:30 on a Friday.
Oh, is it?
I don't know. Can I just come in here? Because we had a little thing about competent. We thought David said competent.
Yes.
And it wasn't. It was combatant, apparently.
Oh, combatant. Oh, yes.
Yes, so somebody's just brought that up.
Thank you for correcting my... Julia often says that my ears are... Yeah, please
Can I just come in on the last point that Chris made? I have very mixed feelings about people unifying. On the one hand, I celebrate it. When they come together, it's something to celebrate. But I always have a feeling that, especially when government officials are now saying that anyone who doesn't, I'm paraphrasing, anyone who doesn't toe the government line is going to be labeled extremist. And it's far easier to dismiss an entire group as extremist than it is, a group with 100,000 in it is far easier to dismiss than 100,000 individuals quietly working together.
Yeah, no, I see that point. I think that's, oh, hang on, which camera are we on? There we go. Absolutely, I can see that point. So there's pros and cons, clearly, to both things. But that's a very good point. There's a question here, which I'm just trying to get up on the screen. Hang on, I've got to move it over here.
The appeals one?
It says, I don't think cashing in Bitcoin on the exchange is a private transaction. How would you get out of paying thousands to HMRC to fund the killing? How would you get out of it?
Well, that would be...
That's what we've been
then
saying.
You're back into trust. You were really...
Yeah.
It had to be a trustee under a trust pulling the strings, and the profits go into the trust, and it can't be touched because it's for the benefit of a beneficiary under a private trust. So that would be the workaround, but it's a workaround in advance, not in arrears.
Yes, and I'm aiming at some point. I did just before Christmas have somebody who was going to talk about private trusts to be able to put stuff into it so that everything is, it's that old thing, you own nothing and be happy, but actually the trust owns it, but nobody can see who the trust members are. But unfortunately, the lady who was going to come on the show had a personal problem, which I can't talk about, mainly because she didn't tell me, and it sounded more dramatic that way. But
Can
she said
I add one thing, please, Richard?
Yes, please.
On the Bitcoin issue, it is just as much a criminal offence to pay tax to the government in relation to Bitcoin transactions as it is for any other
right, because you're
money
still
to the
funding.
government. So use it and put the money they're demanding into trust, and don't fill in the forms, as David said. You must not fill in their forms.
And somebody has said how to form a trust. So will we be able to get this information from your websites, which we will put on the description? People keep asking for your websites, but we'll put them in the description at the end.
Yeah, so, very quickly, a trust document is actually very simple in this country. You can write it on the back of an envelope if you write the right words and you appointed yourself as trustee or somebody else as trustee. It can be as simple as that. But what we've done is to put a comprehensive trust document that anybody can download and just fill it in. Don't make too many changes to it because it is quite deliberately worded in the way that it is in order to make it secure and genuine trust document. And once you have signed and witnessed it, you have got your trust.
That's very interesting because you can go to places and they'll charge you a couple of £1,000 to set this up. And effectively what you're saying is it's certain words on a page and it's just that knowledge you're paying for. But maybe we can get Chris to come on the show once you've remedied the situation you're in. We can have you talk about that, but then also talk about how you set up a trust yourselves.
And also on the back of that, though, when you that sounds great and simple, which is brilliant. But surely that information, that trust, has to be sent somewhere. So those that are after us need to know that we're in a trust, and they can't come banging on our door.
Well, yes, it's important, but don't send that trust document. That is your trustees'
But a copy of it.
Instructions. Send a copy to any body who is questioning why you haven't paid them.
Or you can send it to absolutely everybody anyway, can't you? All the companies, the utilities, the DVLA, the whole lot. Do a nice mail shot.
Customs, the DVLA, the council, they're all included in the wording in the trust document. All they need is a copy of the trust conditions so that they know they can get the money if they meet your conditions.
Right.
And if they don't, they have no right to it at all.
Yeah. And what about a limited company? So, like we were talking about cars last week, if you've got a penalty for speeding or something like that, or parking, can you put the car into a limited company and then you have the same rights as a trust if they want to come and get it, as they might?
I'm not sure about that answer. Maybe David does know that.
David, are you there?
Well, the limited company, if it owns the car, will have will give you will give you a layer of protection, but the limited company ultimately is registered to the government, therefore ultimately owned by the government. So a certain amount of chaos can ensue. If the limited company's registered address is miles away from you, then that's one potential remedy, because they'll be chasing shadows, won't they? It's all about giving out information that will serve you and will make their job as difficult as possible. So we have to be, we have to box clever. You know, we were dragged up at school to answer questions faithfully, fill out forms, yes, madam, yes, sir, yes, miss. But this is the last thing that we should be doing. We should always have one eye on the consequences of compliance. If the consequences of compliance don't seem favorable, then we need to find another route or another remedy. You know, that's just simple common sense, really.
Whilst you're there, there's a question. Is the Exchequer grants supposed to go to private limited businesses? I'm not quite sure what that means, the Exchequer grants. What is an Exchequer grant? Maybe the questioner can tell us. That's Nikki Baxter has asked that question.
That's not my remit. I deal with ordinary people with ordinary issues, and Exchequer grants is above my pay grade.
Yes.
Well, what about, can you put a house with a mortgage in a trust? So if your house has got a mortgage to it, can that go in a trust? Or is there a third party that's interested in it?
You can put the difference between the mortgage and the value into the trust. Yeah, so if the value is 200k and there's 100k left to pay on the mortgage, then in effect you're putting the 100k into the trust.
Can I, just changing the subject just briefly, if you've got, say you're in a partnership with somebody, or you're married or whatever, and you have a property with a mortgage on, but you have debts that accrue, can they be put onto the mortgage or onto the house value? And if it's come from one of the people, like the one partner, whichever one it is, are you able to separate yourself from that debt if it's put onto against the house? I think that's called a lien or something, is it?
Well, there's several questions wrapped inside that question.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. If the, again, always cherchez le contract. If the contract did not place any security on your property, then you are home free. Then it's an unsecured debt, and then we're just talking about pesky visits eventually, unless you do the paperwork, or maybe a black mark on your credit rating. But if there is, like a loan, a secured loan or a mortgage, then it gets very fraught, and you have to tread very carefully. And I wouldn't rely on the advice of anyone, to be honest. I mean, literally no one. Just do your own due diligence, see what you come up with. If it's a shared property, then then essentially simplifying things, yes, your person A's debt is in effect also person B's debt. It can be a bit more complicated than that, but essentially that is, you have that potential, yes, if it's a shared, joint. There's joint and there's joint and several. So it gets complicated, but just be aware that that when there are two parties that own a property, one's debts can affect the other. Yes, as long as it's a secured debt. Yeah.
So T. Crooks, interesting name.
Can I just bring one quick point up?
Yeah.
You mentioned the word several there. Most people understand that as being a lot of people, several people, for instance. But in fact, it means individual.
Does it?
Yeah,
in legalese?
Yes.
I
Yeah,
didn't know that.
good point, Chris. Joint and several means that that you maintain your individuality within that arrangement. Yeah.
Well, thanks for that clarity there. That's fascinating.
That is interesting. All these words, hidden meanings of words. I was going to say, where's Mr. Crooks gone, or Mrs. Crooks? Putting a car in trust name doesn't work anymore, apparently, but it is from T. Crook, so I don't know. Maybe Mr. or Mrs. Crook can follow that up.
And is it? I mean, that's the thing. When you get a statement like that, is it because it didn't work for them, or they didn't do it correctly?
Yeah. Or is it something else?
Or is it that there's a question here, I think, from Sheena, who says, if your compliance results in your enslavement, then can you refuse to comply by law?
That's a very interesting. Well, if compliance results in your enslavement, it's potentially a very complicated answer to that one, and we need to simplify it. If compliance did result in your enslavement, then you accept that you accept to do what you're being asked to do upon conditions. And whoever asked that question, I think, has a good idea of what conditions they should be asking. Upon proof that it would not compromise my lawful universal rights, that it would be in accord with the human rights legislation, European Convention, UN conventions, natural, God-given, unalienable rights, etc., etc. And it's something that I did meant to mention, which is the power of the conditional acceptance. If all else fails, during the COVID hysteria, a lot of people looked me up and asked me for a remedy for all these ridiculous requirements like masks and jabs. And I said, well, just accept them upon conditions. Right. And if you draft the conditions appropriately, and every single person that you took that advice in inverted commas was successful, it was dropped because they can't meet the conditions. Therefore, it relieves you of all potential obligation or requirement. And requirement only means request in legalese anyway.
Oh, and I add one thing to that, David. It's very useful to use the word revocable as well. Because we assume that once we've made an agreement, it goes on forever. But in making that agreement, you can put a date at which it will be revoked if you find that the consequences of your actions are not beneficial to you. So make sure you put in a revocable phrase or a criterion into the agreement.
That's
very good. Yeah, can I just add that some people do that by adding something like errors and omissions accepted, which means that leaves you wriggle room to one day in the future say, I got something wrong, I omitted something, or I made an error. And some people add all unalienable rights reserved. There's many ways that you can cover that base, but yeah, I agree with Chris. Yeah.
Here's a good question about trusts. Somebody has said, should we avoid using a solicitor to set up a trust?
Yes.
A standard solicitor. Yes. You sure about that, David?
Absolutely. I didn't quit the law 4 decades ago for no reason. And we should avoid the following people in no particular order of evil: solicitors, barristers, police officers with strange looks in their eyes, accountants, doctors, nurses, dentists. These are people, and teachers. These people need to be avoided until kingdom come.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Gosh.
So that's a very long list, isn't it? And probably YouTube presenters, I should imagine.
Actually, it's a very short list. I've got a much longer one.
All right. I've got a question here. It's saying, having overpaid £9,000 in tax on a pension drawdown, tax office has sat on it for over 6 months while I struggle to pay bills. How do I challenge this? Am paying overdraft interest while waiting?
Well, if I can jump in, this is a clear section 173 brackets 3 brackets Data Protection Act 2018, blocking concealing access to information relating to personal data. You need access to this data, which is in effect digits, which is in effect funds. And they have no lawful reason to block access to it. So they're committing a criminal offence, but you have to put them on notice of that. Section 173, subsection 3, Data Protection Act 2018.
There you go. And if you missed that, timestamp this now. Go back and write it down afterwards. That's what we all have to do, isn't it, with these YouTube channels? This is going very well. We are 1 hour and 20 minutes into the show with 40 minutes left. I hope people are finding this week's show very different from last week's show. We had a lot of philosophy on last week's show, didn't we?
We did, not so many questions.
And people were a little frustrated with that. But I think that was important, really, to set where we are, because I think just going in and expecting answers like that.
Well, Dave has got the thumbs up there, and it is because you have to. This is all about being sovereign and the spiritual aspect of it again, isn't it? You have to really trust yourself in this. You know, there's no guru, there's no teacher, there's no leader. We have to do the work ourselves, but with awareness and with the correct information, and that does mean work. So we have to not go to the standard barristers and solicitors, go to these guys, go on their websites, and there's a lot of you out there now. And a lot of you are kind of a little bit under the radar, but I know David and Chris have been there at the forefront, the front line. We were banging our saucepans for you.
And this is one of the good reasons for doing these type of shows, of bringing different opinions together so that people get that idea rather than one way only.
Absolutely. And the little advert for your show next week, we're doing it again. I don't know who's coming on board because a lot of these guys are very busy doing workshops and all around the country, but we have got some more people lined up, and I was thinking on the last show, which would be Maunday Thursday or Easter Thursday, whatever it is.
It's the day before Good Friday.
Yeah, it's not Maunday, that's something else, isn't it? I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, the Thursday before Good Friday. Hopefully we can get loads of you on board, and maybe there's a couple of people I've asked that have gone through the system and this system, and with success.
Yes.
So, and because I think that's really important, because we're saying do this, stand up, and don't let them in and everything, and then we hear Chris's sad story.
Yes.
So we need some positivity.
I'd like to ask either of you actually the question, because I think David came up with this point, which I hadn't really thought of before. You mentioned that some of these incidents that we see on YouTube are actors. Do you think that there is opposition staging these things to show that when you challenge it, that it doesn't work, that is a message they're trying to put to prevent people from doing exactly what we're talking about?
100%, Richard. Just as the Chinese choreographed people falling over in the streets.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really interesting.
Well, they are crisis actors, and actually, if you go online and Google crisis actors, you can hire them. They're very readily available, so it's quite amazing what we've learned through this.
Wow.
This few
and as Chris said before, that actually what happened to him is very, very rare, and certainly with a police officer saying no, it's okay to go up the stairs.
But they've got Chris marked, haven't they? I think Chris.
Yes.
You guys that have been out, as I say, at the forefront, they've got their eye on you. Let's put it that way, and that's why we have to be very mindful.
Well, can I just say that when they came for me, and I'm not talking about that gas agent one, this was a COVID incident. When they came for me, they only came for me because in between the incident, which was just me being one of the 3 speakers on the promenade at Morecambe, in between that and them coming for me, I had become the people's lawyer. So David would not have been targeted, but they did want to target the people's lawyer.
Got a question here from David Alexandra, who says, I sent a promissory note and bill of exchange to discharge my fictitious water bill. The water company have rejected it by saying we do not accept bills of exchange. Should they return it?
Well, if they've not returned it, they can't win. If they've not returned it, they've accepted it, and if they return it, they've also accepted it. It's a bit complicated. But all you have to do is check their articles of association, and if you find a clause that says that they have capacity to deal with bills of exchange and promissory notes, then they are in breach of their own constitution, and you can point that out.
And where would you find what did you call it? Not their terms and conditions.
Articles of association. Get their company's house number, go on company's house, and it's public domain documents. Their articles will be in their portfolio on company's house. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you for that.
So they're committing they're committing multiple frauds when they say things like that and do things like that.
And presumably if they don't return it, then they could be using it as money, and you're losing out. I mean, I don't know how all that works, but that's an area that
that's one of the frauds. They're committing fraud by misrepresentation, fraud by non-disclosure, fraud by abuse of position. There's so many frauds, it's just ridiculous. They're hard to pin down, but if you just use the word fraud in a respectful tone, you know, what I recommend to people is that rather than, you see, we don't shout these things from the rooftops and the rafters because that's how we get into trouble. What I suggest to people is that it seems to me that we could be dealing with a potential fraud here. So you play the innocent, almost childlike card, you know, and it's like you're scratching your chin, wondering what's going on. But use the word fraud without accusing anybody of anything.
Yes, that was very good.
I'm back, by the way. Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. We lost you for a moment there, and it's good to see you back.
I'm afraid this happens
and your front.
And your front, and your side, and the top, yeah. Can I say something?
Of course
now?
you can. No, of
course you can. It's only because they've got so much knowledge. I don't want to interrupt when they're screaming out this great information. So somebody said they've suggested another name. I won't say it, but other people that need to come on the show on this panel.
Yes.
Because the panel really the idea is to get the information out to as many people because it is a numbers game, isn't it? As we know. So I would say if there is anybody that you know that has this knowledge, they've done the work about common law, constitutional law, natural law, all of this, then I would ask you to contact me. We'll put my email at the bottom, Kizzy, Kizzi 63 @pm.me. So and then I can again organise another panel if we can use Richard's show because he's got such an amazing following because so many people want that information.
And if they've been on the show, then at least that I would know of them
as
well.
absolutely.
And people would be familiar.
Yeah. And I don't think it's nice to see your face, but some maybe want to be incognito. You know, we can have them.
Well, we can certainly do that as well. I mean, as much as possible, it's lovely to see their face because I think that people warm to people and can.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot of trust. We've been talking about trusts.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of trust. But I know that I have got some people coming on, I think early next week, who do not want to be seen, but they want the information they've got out there. And what do? I want the information to go out, and people will make their own due diligence and decide. And I think that's very important. Just to stress that, don't take any advice or the information, then just immediately apply it and think that's all you need to do, because you can get into hot water. But we'd love to have more views and ideas, really. Yeah,
and also what we're thinking of is having like a little road show, aren't we? We're talking about a road show, and one of the guys on our little group, Eli, who runs the Shine seminars, has suggested the 26th of May. That's a total guess, so ignore that. It might be the 26th.
With
down
big
in
Winnie
Glastonbury.
Bagos, is that right? Big Winnie Bagos and little sort of massage room.
Oh, that would be wonderful. But it is, he's booked Glastonbury, Sunday the 26th of May, and I think David was up for that, and I think Andy Barlow, I think I might have seen that. So that's, he's around So that's what we're trying to do is get people on the road as well. I know you guys have been doing a lot of workshops and courses and what have you, but it's about bringing this information to the masses in whichever way we can. So watch this space for that if it comes about. Hopefully it will.
And just before you go, somebody's just mentioned, Duncan Bruce has just said Stan McDonald would be great on the live show. Stan, he disappeared for a bit, went back to Canada, I believe, and I'm now back in touch with him. I thought something rather nasty had happened to poor old Stan, because I said, where did you go? And he did tell me the story, but he's back, and I've got him booked on this show.
Wonderful.
I can't remember what we're going to talk about, something exciting. So he was very popular, and we did a live question and answer show, actually.
Brilliant.
Which was very nice, and people were donating money, and I sent it all to him.
Oh, brilliant.
So that was really good. Have we got any more questions? We've got about half an hour to go. And thank you, by the way, for the messages that have been popping up. We've been watching them in between talking, saying great show. Thanks very much, guys. Really appreciate it and all that. All that sort of positive.
It helps, doesn't it?
energy
It's inspirational.
Absolutely, because this is about a positive turnaround to the tyranny that is being forced.
Played
I mean,
out.
and who
Yeah.
would have thought? Here we are now. 10 years ago, probably this would have been unachievable.
Yeah,
But,
So, the internet has it's
Yeah,
good. It's good. Some of the tools that have been out there. Don't know about AI, but again, it's who's using it, isn't it? It's like you can have a dog if you've got a good owner, and you have a good dog, but if you've got a naughty owner, you're going to have a bad dog. So it's the same thing with...
Yeah, talking about that, Robert from Observation Deck is coming on the show, and he's been playing about with AI, and he's asked AI about the legal fiction. He's asked them how you go back against bailiffs or enforcement agents. And I did ask him in exchange of emails, which I do ask about AI and ChatGTP, is how do you check the sources that ChatGTP have? Because if you read a book, you can see who the author is, you can check out who
the
they are,
references.
exactly. But that's my only reserve. We've got some more questions coming in. Have you got any that you want to go?
Well, I've only got the one that you sent and you put on the group that came in. Shall I mention
that
that?
one,
Is this going to the good old... is that the one? Yes, smart meters. Oh, is that the right one? Question for tonight. Could I pose a question for tonight's panel around... Oh, this isn't the one I wanted to say, actually. Council tax. Again, back to council tax. Having received my bill with liable people being listed as, in capitals, Mr. Capitalised Fiction, would it not seem reasonable as beneficiary to that capitalised fiction and the attached... I can never say this word. Say that...
Oh, the Qu'est-ce que
trust, to simply authorise the local authority to settle from the said trust, as that is the stated fiction they claim to be liable on the council tax bill. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So taking the money out of the trust, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, take the money out of the Qu'est-ce que... Would anybody like to answer that?
I'll very briefly say that, it sounds like a good idea. I know almost nothing about it, but if it works, try it and feedback the success.
Brilliant. And
Can I just add something? In theory, it is a good remedy, but in practice, I would say it's got very little chance of success. And the reason why I say that is because precisely, funnily enough, for the same reason I've just said what I've just said, it's such a good remedy, they can't afford it to succeed because everybody will jump on the bandwagon, and that's the end of council tax. So remember, we're playing the war games. These are war games, political shenanigans, and what in theory works, in practice, no. So what does that mean? Don't give up, try it. If prove me wrong, I love to be proven wrong, because at the end of the day, what do I know? I'm only just one man. But just be prepared for it not to work and to find something else. And the something else are the things that I teach on my course, basically. That's one way. There's always plenty of other remedy.
And I think that's a good observation for all of the stuff, isn't it? To not just assume it's going to work just immediately, that there might be some toing and froing and shifting and not shifting, whatever the word is, on all these things that we're doing. We mustn't expect that you've just written that one letter and that's it, bang, off it goes, and there we are, I've sorted that problem out. That there's going to be pushback from these people who've always been winning for so long. The audacity of ordinary everyday people getting in touch with them and saying, actually, I want to challenge you, must be quite a shock for them. So I had a message here that the lovely Julia is monitoring, by the way, and thank you, Julia, for doing the monitoring in the chat. She says, is there a book that any of the panel can recommend that would educate one on how to set up a trust without a solicitor? Is there any, or even a website, I suppose, that might do that? Anybody, Chris or David?
Well, I've been looking at a book which is excellent. It's called Equity and Trust, and it's about 1,150 pages, so it's not easy to get through. But I would recommend actually doing a simple program just focusing on setting up trusts and how to go about it. And I think we ought to try and get one or two experts together to go through a simple process for people.
Brilliant. David.
If I can add a couple of things. I sometimes signpost people to an American site called Brilliance in Commerce, and they have a natural trust handbook, just as a useful starting point. That's all. It just give you an idea of navigating this very grey area.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, I think it's very good to start in a very simple way, because when Chris was talking about a book, I've got a similar book with a similar name of a similar amount of pages in, a great big tome of the thing, and I tried to read it, and I was lost very quickly because I think I needed to understand the ground, very simple terms and slowly come to it softly, because I thought, I'll just solve all this by reading this massive tome. And I was just reading words, and they weren't making anything sensible in my head. So,
the thing I would
David.
add to that,
Yes,
if I
David.
can, is
Of course.
there's a course called Law for Mankind, which I think deals in very, very, very simplified trust language, how to create a very simple trust as a man or a woman, run by, I think it's Greg and Paul, I think. One's American, one's British. Law for Mankind. And my own course will give you a grounding in the principles of trust and equity that will help you. It's a part of the course. It's not by any means a substantial part, but it's a good grounding. So there's plenty of ways. And that Natural Trust Handbook of Brilliance in Commerce is just 70 very easy to read pages. So so those are 3 good starting points. Yeah.
Thanks for that, guys. Much appreciated. We've got 35 minutes or so left. Not had any news from Alan of Salisbury.
I just checked. No, I think he's off grid.
Oh, hang on, I've got your microphone switched down.
Sorry. No, we haven't heard from Alan. I did just check, but he's obviously not going to make it. I think he's run out of power.
Well, not to worry. Our 2 wonderful panellists are doing excellent work, and we're whipping them hard to get those answers.
Steady, Richard, steady.
Then I had a couple of bits here.
Please do.
A lot of people ask me about cooperatives and how to set up alternative structures so that when we do move into a better world, we've got the basis for which we can do it. That's one thing. And the other one is about prosecuting some of our leaders for what is going on right now. Both of those areas I'm frequently asked about them, and it may be worthwhile just checking if people have questions around those 2 areas.
Right, yeah, that's interesting.
Very. I like this comment. It says, be the one to execute your trust. Be the one to execute your own trust.
There's a book, isn't there, called that? I've got it.
Maybe that's what it's referring to.
Yeah,
have you?
There's a book.
Oh, yeah,
there.
by David Robinson. I didn't read the end bit. Okay.
Yeah, I sent off that book about a month ago, and
right.
It's easy to read. But you've got to get all the concepts into your head.
You've got to really understand this, haven't you? You've really got to understand it. And it's the same thing as the question that the lovely Julia's just passed. How should we deal with repeated bailiffs, threatening letters and emails? I mean, it's what does one do when they keep coming? Do you send them back?
People have... Sorry.
Yeah, hang on. Here we go. It's that time of the evening.
The comedy glasses are back on.
Yeah. Right. Okay, let me just go through very quickly some of the offences committed by enforcement agents. I'll focus more on the ones that they commit when they're writing to you. Well, we mentioned the criminal exploitation, not giving you a choice. Modern Slavery Act 2015, Section 3, subsection 5. There's harassment, Protection from Harassment Act 1997, Sections 1 and Section 3. Malicious communication, which is sending threatening letters, or just threatening, or that's Malicious Communications Act 1988, or sending annoying communications, that's the Communications Act 2003. Let's have a look. There's Blackmail, Theft Act 1968, Section 21. If they're very, very heavy-handed threats, that could be demanding money with menaces. What else? I think that'll do.
What would you call demanding money with menaces? I mean, how would you? What would you say the menaces are, other than give us your sodding money, mate, or bash your, bash your brains
I suppose it's it's really it's intimidatory tactics. Yeah,
it's harassment, isn't it? I mean, can you do something on the harassment act? If there is such an act.
Yes, absolutely. If it's particularly aggravated, you only need one incident. Otherwise, it's known as a course of conduct.
I'll give you an example of what happened to me 10 days ago. The police officers that said there, unless you let these guys in, I shall arrest all 5 of you.
All 5?
There was 4 friends of mine.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant the debt collectors.
Yes. And that was a threat. And
wow, and he can't do that.
But what would they do? I mean, would they? In some part, it's probably better to have been arrested rather than beaten up. I would.
Well, I would have preferred it. I have been arrested many times.
Yeah, but you didn't know that they were going to do that, of course.
No, absolutely not. I thought I was going to be arrested and getting ready for it.
Every cloud has a silver lining, and although it's not a very nice situation that you've gone through, you are being the warrior here, Chris, and that's why I think it's really, really important for us to see the outcome, when you pursue this and
I
get
will
this
keep you in touch with it.
Yeah, definitely, because that's what we need. Somebody has to take the lead, and you guys are. So again, hat goes off to you. Huge respect.
Can I just jump in with something? What we all forget at times, funnily enough, the braver we are, the more we're more likely to forget it, is that any words or behavior that put you in anxiety or fear is a common law crime known as assault.
Is it?
People get assault and battery confused. The physicality of it, like putting a jab in someone when they haven't given informed consent, that's battery. Right. Touching someone in a threatening way is battery. But simply saying, we're going to arrest you with no lawful justification is criminal assault. Even by a police officer, in fact, especially by a police officer, because they should know better.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they have the renown, they have the power of arrest. So we have to remember that at all times, people, that if you are put into anxiety, you have been assaulted, and that is a crime.
And will they take that seriously if you go to the police station the next day or that afternoon, whatever, and say, I have been assaulted, I was threatened with an arrest by a sergeant who was at my house? Will they actually do it? Because you keep hearing people struggling to record crime and get a crime number from police stations saying, no, we're not interested.
No, in the ordinary course of events, no, they will treat you as a nuisance, and you won't get a positive outcome. But if enough people are doing this, then it builds up the pressure. We build up pressure on them, and they will crack eventually. So people out there, keep doing it, knowing that in an isolated individual case, it will almost certainly not have any positive outcome. But collectively, we are building up evidence that will put pressure on the system, and it will accelerate its imminent implosion.
And I think this is a couple of nice comments from Truth Teller. He reminds us that the cowardly lion was a bully, but was a true coward when someone stood up to him. He lacks true courage. And then the immediate comment underneath from Leave My Rights Alone says, the straw man has no heart. So I think it's quite nice to remind ourselves of these things from the Wizard of Oz, Yep. It's a lot of people in uniform with fists, but they're cowards, a lot of them. They have to hide behind a uniform.
And the Tin Man was the tax identification number.
Okay.
The tax identification number.
Yeah, that's the Tin Man. Yeah, that's the.
Is that probably is true? That's because they tell us everything in the stories, don't they? So the Wizard of Oz.
No. It's one of the most. It's one of the biggest disclosure films of all time. It's known amongst freedom, lawful, sovereign circles. It's one of the big ones.
It would be good to go through that film.
Oh, I think we should analyse it.
Analyse it one, but with somebody who knows.
And then the following week we could do Mamma Mia.
And okay, just on this subject, I can't resist this. The Wizard of Oz was the dark magician that turned gold, measured in ounces, into fictitious currency.
Right.
Well, there you go.
Yes.
There you go.
The Wizard of Oz, what? He was because the
Well,
wonderful
Oz
things
is
he
short
does.
for ounces of gold. Oz, ounces of gold. The yellow brick road, gold.
Yes.
And the wizard is the dark, satanic bankster that makes us believe that his banknotes are the equivalent of gold.
Right.
Fascinating.
No, that's really interesting. I think we should analyse that. I think you should do a show. Yeah.
Yes.
Get Judy Garland.
There's no place like home.
There's no place
And
like
luckily, I'm here.
Can I say something here again?
Of course you can.
Bless you.
Can
I
I
just
say
can I
something?
put my hand up, sir? See, we're conditioned, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
Need to go to Mr. Alderman's School of Learning and be de-educated. Right, so you sent this. Thank you, Richard.
That's
You
all right.
sent this last night on the little group. This is about smart meters, and a couple of people have contacted me actually through the Freedom Network about smart meters, and it's difficult to answer individuals, although we're doing our best, isn't it? The personal story, but we're doing our best. So smart meter question statement for tonight. If is somebody from the fan of the channel, so now he says
There is one.
There is one.
Fantastic.
There's
It's nice
more.
to-
There's more. Double numbers here.
Blimey.
Double figures. So this chap or chapess says, I work for one of the big 6 energy companies. And I'm happy to help anyone who comes to you with a smart meter concern. They do not need them. They are not mandated, and old meters, especially those with manual non-digital meters, last for a long time. I was hoping they don't, because I've got a problem with my meter, saying I thought they only had a shelf life of 10 years, but that's another story. However, all modern companies now will not support traditional meters, and if they have an issue with their meter, it will be replaced with a smart meter, unfortunately.
And the question is,
Well, that was it. You sent it. It was just a statement, but it was just a statement. But I think it's the guy that works for one of the companies.
Yes.
So he's just telling that, and I think he was saying he can assist. I'm happy to help anyone who comes to us or you with concerns about the smart meter. So I think that's really.
so I mean, some of the questions that I've had, which would be good to put to the panel,
Yeah.
is do you have to have them? Is it mandatory? Can they force them down your throat? And if they do you have to let them in to change it?
Because there was a law. The government was putting a law through, wasn't it, saying that they were.
Yeah,
Look,
I
he's
think the
smiling.
Energy Act is.
David is so happy here. Look, you can't wait to get at this one.
Absolutely. Let's break down the word mandated, just as we broke down the word required before. Mandated means that you're under contract. Mandated, you can only mandate, so the government can mandate the NHS, and that's it. The government can mandate the service providers for gas, electricity, but that's it. If you are a man or a woman, unless you've signed a contract, and none of us have, you cannot be mandated. So the short answer to the question, can you be mandated, required? Can you be requested? Can you be asked? Yes. Can you say no? Yes. End of. Very simple.
Yeah. That is the fear that comes in. I get quite a lot of those. If I do a monologue about smart meters for any reason, people are saying, oh, but I'm being pressured to change. They're telling me that they're no longer supporting these meters, and therefore, if I have a new meter, I've got to have, and,
We don't want
and
them.
I've answered them by saying, use the fact that nobody knows what the radiation damage is, and have they got any liability insurance if they drop dead?
Well, we're back to the notice of conditional acceptance, provided you can prove that they're safe, provided that you can prove that they are going to outperform previous meters, because it looks as though and show that my analog meter is defective in some way. I have a friend who's done my course, actually, who's just written a letter to his service or alleged supplier, and they're not suppliers, that's another day's work, saying that the matter, as far as I'm concerned, is closed. There'll be no smart meter in this house. But if you contact me, I will allow you to write to me one more time in the next 12 months. If you write to me or contact me beyond that, then I will charge, I forget what he put, £1,000 per phone call or £2,000 per letter to deal with the admin. So you put them off wanting to pester you. I mean, to be honest, he's being generous, even allowing them even one communication. But the point is that we should be dealing with these people on terms that are at least equal, if not favourable, and putting the ball back in their court, and reminding them in no uncertain terms that we're the customer, therefore what we say goes. And guess what? Customer's always right.
An interesting comment that I had from somebody else on smart meters was every time they have a conversation with anybody and they just want to say, I don't want a smart meter, they have to go through this automated system which they are asked personal data every time. Can you answer one of these 4 questions? And it's always personal data in order to so-called verify themselves. And they were asking, is it really necessary to continually go through this personal data? I did say to them that if and when they ever ring you, ask them for some personal data to, where do you live? What's your birth date? And see how they like it, because they probably will not go any further with the conversation.
Yeah, turn it on them, turn it back. But,
in fact, that's the best way to deal with cold callers. Just say, before I answer any of your questions, I would like to put you through security. I need your name, full name, address, and date of birth, please.
Yeah.
They'll put the phone down very quickly. You won't hear from them again.
Yeah.
We've got a question here from Iceman Coffee. Chris or Dave, is there a way where you can express there's a trust in place to the relevant parties to make them aware that there's a trust in place? Then fine-tune the trust as you go along. So I think we answered that at the beginning, didn't we? More or less, saying do your trust and then send it off to everybody.
Yeah,
I wouldn't fine-tune it as you go along. I mean, it's important
do it at the beginning
to have it right from the start and be quite clear what it is you're putting in trust and the conditions that have to be met and the date on which it will be revoked. Then you can fine-tune it for the next year in slightly a different way if you've got different people asking you for money and so on. But don't change it, but just send them a copy of your original document so they can meet the conditions.
And revoked, you said when it's going to be revoked. Does that mean?
So all the ones that I've done based on taxation are revoked on April the 5th, which is the last day of the financial year. So April the 6th is the first day of the next financial year. So revoke it on the last day of the financial year, because that's the system they operate to.
So I'm confused. Doesn't revoke mean like put a stop to it?
Yes, exactly. Put a stop to it.
So, hang on. So you're putting a stop to your own trust, or then you're issuing another one?
It's a taxation trust for the beneficiaries.
Okay.
And you are only a secondary beneficiary and not a primary beneficiary.
Right.
You are the settler and the trustee and the secondary beneficiary, but not the primary beneficiary. If you put it as a primary beneficiary, you commit a criminal offence.
I'm just going to slip in a question here, because we're coming close to the end, and I want to give you both an opportunity to be able to tell us what you're doing in the future, so that if anybody wants to come along and see you. This is an interesting question, which comes from Mr. Menson. He says, are utilities already paid for, hence they send you a gyro slip as a bill? Does anybody know anything about that?
They are, really, to be quite honest. When you drill down deep into the arena of money, you soon come to the conclusion. If you watch the videos of Mike Maloney, for example, or the work of Professor Richard Werner with a W because he's German, then you will realize that there is no money, therefore nobody could pay for anything anyway, and nobody's been able to pay for anything anyway for about 100 years, roughly. So everything is in trust, everything is in bankruptcy, everything is in administration, and the source of the energy, whether it's water, gas, or electricity, is natural, and natural resources, unless I'm grievously mistaken, cannot be owned, because only the creator can own them. So no service corporation, and indeed not even any government, can pretend to own that resource. It's all mind play, mind play. That's all it is. If it helps to consider it as prepaid, because maybe your grandfather helped dig up the road and put the pipes down, then fair enough. But it was sweat equity from our ancestors that laid the foundations. If in doubt, put them to prove that they own these resources and that you are in contract to pay for something and that they are providing consideration, tangible consideration. No, it's all credit brokerage and it's all playing on our minds. Yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yes, of course.
Remember that it's also public property. All of these companies were public property, and Mrs. Thatcher, who started the whole privatization process, had no right to sell public property. And she just took that upon herself and her government and handed it over. It was all a criminal offence at the time.
Brilliant. Well, listen, we're coming to the end of the show, and it's been fantastic. Lots of questions. We hope that we've answered many questions that people have been putting out. We've been trying to keep an eye on the comments for your various bits and bobs. Before we go, as I said just now, it'd be nice just to give the panel a chance to, if they're anywhere in the next couple of weeks. I know David's hinted at the place that we're up north. Up north,
by it, lad. Enjoy that, won't you?
That I'm involved with. But start with you, Chris. Are you giving any talks or doing anything that we should know about?
Yes, basically, I'm trying to help the No Tax for Genocide group to get the word out, and we are starting to get interest from overseas, which is nice as well.
Wow.
So that's one of the things. I'm giving a talk on Sunday. It's at a private house with 20 invited guests, so I won't publicize it.
Sure.
And yes, I give talks all around the country. I'm up in Birmingham shortly and various other places. So
and people can contact you through your website, presumably, if they would like to get
indeed,
you for
yes, indeed. So either probityco.com or probityco.org. We're also trying to support prosecutions of some of our leaders. I originally came into the government sites when I tried to take Blair and others to court for war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide. And I'm trying right now to do the same, to reinstigate those prosecutions, criminal proceedings rather, to ensure that some of our leaders are held to account for the up to 1 million deaths that they have caused. People like Johnson and others.
Powerful
so we
stuff.
Need to really
Very laudable.
focusing on that.
And David, before we run out of time, you're often gallivanting about the country. What, apart from the ones that you've just told us, or you're welcome to mention them again, of course, what are you up to and where can people find you?
Well, with your permission, may I just briefly share my screen?
I can't really do that on the way that we do it. I can't grab
Not
it
been
very
set
easily.
up, no.
Oh, you can't? Okay, all right.
Sorry about that.
All right, I'll have to just discuss it then. Well, with a view to helping the farmers and anyone who's going to be rallying, gathering, and out there fighting their corner, I've created a version of my personal protection card, and it's on one of the pages of my website. It's QR coded for a PDF download, and it's called Universal Self-Protection to avoid conflict and unnecessary stress and aggravation with police or agents who are up to no good and trying to kettle you or corral you or accuse you of crimes that you've not committed. So that's on my website with a QR code, and it's called Universal Self-Protection. Next week, I'm going to add to that the equivalent for individuals who are assailed by police. They're not gathering, they're just out there by themselves, maybe they're driving along. And people who are threatened with or actually receive visits at home, or people who receive cold calls that threaten them. So there'll be essentially 2 info packs. One is for the gatherings, and one is for the individual that's being assaulted, threatened, etc., etc. And I really need those to go out there. They are QR coded, so people will be able to download them easily. Where am I going to be? Yes, I mentioned it. Tomorrow in Shoreham by Sea near Brighton. and Burnley on Sunday the 24th with Richard and John O'Looney, and I think it's Carly Spell. And then there's a hiatus in April. If anyone, particularly in the London area, would like a talk, and my current talk is called Building Resilience to Navigate the Apocalypse, then please get in touch and I'll come and do a talk in the London area, because I haven't done London for a little while. Then in May, I'm in Stoke and North Devon towards the end of May. And as you say, might be involved in this live panel organized by Eli. Online, I've got my course. People are welcome to sign up. It's the only thing I charge for. Everything else is either free completely or by donation, because I have to earn some kind of living until further notice. And you can either do it by yourself quietly, downloading all the materials you need, an incredible amount of materials, and for an extra fee, join the never-ending Until Kingdom Come live Q&A sessions on Zoom. And I do 3 of those a month. And if you need to join, come on forever, then come on forever. There's no time. It's not a time-stamped course. It's a forever course.
Right, brilliant. Thank you very much, David. I'll be doing a hillbilly dance routine next week at a superstore near you. Karen, you've got Freedom events coming up.
I have.
You may as well mention
I think, yeah,
some
why,
of those.
why not? Yeah, but I don't know when they are. I think I do, because you're coming to it. I think it's the 3rd to 5th of May at Hope Sussex. We've got the 12th Uprise and Shine conference, and that will be on the Freedom Network website, which is still, very active. So if people want to find, because on this chat, a lot of people said, can we meet up maybe afterwards up north and what have you, which is great, because it is about bringing people together. So if you do go onto the Freedom Network website, you can go onto the interactive map and find hubs in your area, and find your local tribe, to get the information out and do what we're all doing. And also, before I just finished, I just wanted to say, to learn more about trusts, I haven't read the book yet. It's just arrived today from that Jungle Shop, the one I'm referring to.
The Big River.
Yeah, The Big River. By Alistair Hudson, called Understanding Equity and Trusts. And apparently there's a lot of information in that book. So I'm going to start really learning it so I can, stand up for myself and I know what I'm talking about. So you might want to try and find a copy of that, Understanding Equity and Trust.
You just bought the last one.
Well, do you know, that's the thing. There's so many issues. This is the 7th edition, but they become very expensive because some people don't want us to buy them, do they?
No.
That's the thing.
No. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've been on there for 2 hours live. Thank you so much for joining us and being part of it. A very, very big thanks to our wonderful panel. We have here, of course, Chris Coverdale. Thank you so much, Chris.
Delighted.
And it's been an absolute pleasure. And David Edelman, the People's Lawyer. I was hoping you'd say something so the screen.
Oh, I'm
would
sorry.
change.
I was just.
No. There we go.
There you go. There I am. Yeah, it's been. Thank you very much, you guys. Richard and Karen. and Chris as well. It's been an absolute pleasure. Let's do it again sometime.
Indeedy. Next week.
Big thanks to the lovely Julia, who you can't see, who's been moderating and just making sure everyone's behaving themselves in the chat room. And enormous thanks to you, the viewer, for coming along and asking all your questions. We'll be doing it all again next week at the same time. We have a different panel. Do we know who they are?
Not sure. Exciting.
Pinky and Perky will be there with Noddy and Toyland, so do come along and
you
see
and me.
those. Yes, don't rely on me, certainly. So thank you very much. I'll be back, of course, with more monologues and other interviews and what have you. But in the meantime, from the whole team, thank you for watching. Look after yourself, take care, and we'll be back again soon.
Yeah. Good night.
Bye-bye.